I don't know what my hair is doing today. I feel like I'm going for an early 2000s poof, but it's like kind of funky, but I'm just gonna let it live its life. Who cares? That's not why you're here. If you are here, thank you. This is a weird video. My sleep schedule is very off this weekend, and it's really and I like everything I had planned for this weekend had to go due to a COVID exposure. So I'm kind of in a weird place. Someone else is weird. It's hot out. You know, it's fine. Murphy, we read for like 5 hours yesterday. Did we not cuddle enough then? Can I look at my notes, please, sir? Anyways, so I wanted to do a video. This is kind of a book recommendation video, kind of just like talking through some books. I don't know. I wanted to talk about books that made me cry. So as a backstory to this, I am a crier in general. Like, I'm a pretty easy crier. Like, your girl cries at commercials, at the vague thought of certain sad things. When I'm overwhelmed, I cry a lot. It's really awkward when you work in like a professional environment and your like default reaction is to cry. I work really hard to not cry at work. But it's happened like once at my current job. But anyways, but that being said, I was never a book crier. Like, I don't remember ever crying reading a book as a kid, ever. And that is why I think the first book that ever made me cry was such a big deal. And it was like it opened the floodgates. Now, I know some people have said, I think Sarah Wendell from Smart Bitches said once she never cried until she got pregnant, like with one of her kids, and then she cried while reading a book, and then like from then on out she was like done. But I don't even have like that explanation of like a hormonal surge. I don't know what happened. I will talk about that one book in here. I think I've talked about it before. I usually, when I cry when reading, it's usually what I would call a soft cry, like a few trickles down my cheeks. Nothing particularly aggressive, but occasionally I will have like a bawling my eyes out, can't even read the book cry. I also often can tell when something is going, like, I can see there are certain story elements that will usually make me cry. And so one, if I think those things are going to happen and I don't want to cry, I will avoid those books at that time. Sometimes I also seek it out if I just want a good cry. You can get like a very good cathartic release from a cry. To me, or at least for me, sometimes after a good cry, I sleep very well. I wake up so congested, but I sleep well. Even in a book, sometimes like I might stop because I'll see a certain thing happening. There are a couple very specific scenarios that I know are always going to set me off. Like, honestly, even if I like don't care about people, if these things come up, they make me cry. And a lot of times when that happens, I'll kind of like stop and try to prepare myself for the book, or like for those scenes, so I don't cry too much. And part of the reason I just don't want to cry, sometimes I just don't want to cry, but the other thing is because it makes me very congested. Sometimes I just don't want to cry because I don't want to be congested. Anyways, so I wanted to talk about 5 books that have made me cry. So the first one is the first book that ever did that, and that is The Book of Scandal by Julia London. I've talked about this book before. It is a second chance romance, reunited lovers. It's a marriage that has fallen apart. The hero and heroine have lost their child a few years prior to this. And this is the story of them coming together and dealing with their grief that they handled in very different ways, and finding out if they can be a couple together again. And that is in and of itself a trope I very much like. I like a reunited marriage, a second chance romance, but this felt very raw and emotional. I'm sure it would be very hard for certain people to read. I have never had a child. I've never been pregnant. So I have no actual frame of reference. I've had people in my life who've had miscarriages and infant mortality, but it's not something that I personally experienced, but it was still a very emotional story, and it felt so real, and it was heartbreaking to see this couple go through this and to grow through it as well. I think it's probably one of the hardest things that can happen in a relationship is to lose a child, and to maintain that relationship, for sure. And I think that's one of the reasons I love this book so much, is I think it gives you that look of faith and hope in romance. Next, this one had me ugly crying, for sure, and that is Still Beating by Jennifer Hartmann. I feel like a lot of people feel this way. I think this book, I haven't read any other Jennifer Hartmann yet, but The Wrong Heart I plan on reading soon. I'm kind of putting it off because I'm sure it's going to make me ugly cry too. But just based on what that is, the synopsis is, I feel like she's kind of like Colleen Hoover, where like the shtick is the like making you cry, like the super almost over the top scenarios. This one, it has a lot of difficult topics in it. I don't really have any triggers or anything. Like, there are things I don't love to read in my books, specifically animal death. I don't love child death either, especially on page. I don't have triggers. There's nothing that I will like actively avoid. But this one is two people who get kidnapped. They don't like each other. He's dating her sister. They're engaged. But yeah, they get kidnapped and basically are forced to have sex with each other by their kidnapper, and then are rescued and have to deal with the fallout. And this whole book is just an emotional wreck for me. I'm not sure I would cry if I read this again, but I'm also not sure I would ever read it again. I gave it 5 stars. It was a very moving story. I enjoyed myself as much as you can enjoy yourself reading something like that, but it is a very hard read. Next was one of my new favorites, The Hollow Heart by Marie Rutkowski, the second book in the Forgotten Gods duology. This was definitely more of a subtle cry, but it was through most of the book, and it was mainly during Sid's chapters, especially Sid when it came to dealing with stuff with her parents, whether her parents were around or not. For some reason, those thoughts that she had about herself, about her relationship with her parents, about her perceived relationship with her parents, were so moving to me. I think part of it is Marie Rutkowski's ability to write. But I almost feel like this would be very hard to read as a parent, because I think that there's a lot here where Sid thinks her parents feel a certain way about things, and I don't think that they do feel that way. But as a kid, you think maybe your parents are doing something or saying something because they have an agenda, or they have a specific agenda, but really they do want what's best for you, or because they're not explaining themselves well. Because at the end of the day, your parents, while being your parents, are just people. Like, there's no magical thing for them to know how to explain to you what they think. And there's a lot of layers of complexity here in this story, but it was just so hard to read, and like in a good way. And I hope I remember this if I'm ever a parent, to like hopefully kind of maybe think about how I talk to my kids. And there's things you don't always pick up on, and I think it's a fiction novel, I know that, but I think there's lessons to be learned here. Next is Riffs and Refrains by Devney Perry. This was in the I don't remember what this series is called, but the first one is Lies and Lullabies by Serena Bowen, and the last one is Muses and Melodies, but I don't remember who the author is. This one had Holly is going to cry reading this all over it. I don't even remember what made me cry, but there's like, I think that there's like a sick parent, and that usually gets me. There's a kid, which often does get me. There was just a lot of stuff in here that I knew was gonna make me cry, and it did make me cry. And now I can only think of Devney Perry as an author who will make me cry, and it is why I have avoided her other books. I want to read them, but I'm also worried they're just going to make me cry. And the last one is specifically Ricochet by Krista and Becca Ritchie. I think I have cried during every Lilo book. In the whole Addicted series, I think all 5 of them made me cry. But Ricochet in particular, which is book 1.5, was a doozy for me, that's for sure. This is the one where Lily and Lauren are separated because he is in rehab for his alcoholism, and Lily is at the same time kind of trying to deal with her sex addiction. She is, I believe, seeing a therapist at the time, but she's also trying, the main thing is she's trying not to cheat on Lo. And there are just, I think it's on the yacht, like the scene with Reich gets me every time. I'm a sucker for an addiction story. I didn't say this on here, but I think it's Steadfast is what it's called. The book in the, oh, are they right here? Yes, Steadfast by Serena Bowen. Jude's story, he's an addict as well in recovery. That's another one that gets me. There's something about reading about an addict dealing with their addiction, whether they are actively in it, actively fighting it, some combination of that gets to me, especially if it's done well. I think as somebody who has not been a drug addict or a sex addict or an alcoholic, it feels very real and raw to me. I do find I have a pretty addictive personality. I always have. It has been disruptive to me in my past. It is one of the reasons I have specifically avoided any kind of drugs. Fortunately, I don't like alcohol, so that worked out for me. The one time I took an opiate for pain, it was amazing. I told a coworker and friend that I felt amazing, and I was like, this is like the best I've felt in months. And she said, and that's why people get addicted to them. And I had a panic attack that night. Looking back on it, I did have a nurse tell me that they thought I was having a panic attack, probably because I was afraid I would become addicted to them, and I never took them again. And I now tell doctors I do not want to be prescribed that medication if I have pain issues. So because it is something that I'm actively trying to avoid, because I know what my brain is like. And so the thought process around a lot of these characters' addiction feels a lot like what I feel like when I can feel myself being drawn to something. And I've seen stuff be very negative in my own life, obviously on a much more minor scale. But I think that's also one of the reasons I get so emotionally invested in these stories, is because I can see myself in a different place going down those paths. And it's part crying because you're sad and you feel for these characters, and it's part you feel sad for yourself, because what if that was you, or what if you have a family member? And I think there's also like the tears of joy of knowing that these characters can get a happily ever after. And I truly believe that everybody deserves a second chance, a third chance, and deserves happiness and joy. And I think just because you're a drug addict, or because you go to jail, or because of whatever thing, doesn't mean that you aren't deserving of love and forgiveness and redemption. And that's one of the reasons I read romance, is because it gives me a faith in humanity. I don't know, this went places I wasn't expecting. Yeah, those are some books that have made me cry in the past, and some things that might make me cry. Do you like when a book makes you cry? Do you do what I do, where like you avoid certain books if you think they're gonna make you cry, but you seek them out if you think they're gonna make you cry because you want to cry? Or is it just me? Am I just a weirdo? I mean, I am, but you know. So, but those are some books. Let me know if you've read any of these as well. Did you cry? I don't know. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.